Imagine praying 5 times a day for 20 years. 20 years of standing, bowing, prostrating. Thousands of hours devoted to Salah. Then one day a scholar tells you, you've been missing the most important part of prayer the entire time. That's what happened to countless Muslims throughout Islamic history. They performed Salah correctly. Their movements were precise. Their timing was perfect. But something vital was missing. The Quran describes successful believers this way. Successful indeed are the believers who are humble in their prayers. Notice the word, humble, not just correct. Humble. There's a difference. And today, we're exploring what that difference actually is. Let's start with a simple question. When you pray, what are you actually doing? Most Muslims answer, I'm worshiping Allah, I'm asking for forgiveness, I'm showing gratitude. These answers are correct, but they're incomplete. Islamic scholarship, grounded in the Quran, the Hadith, and centuries of scholarly interpretation, reveals that Salah operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The Quran itself says, indeed, prayer restrains from immorality and wrongdoing. Quran 29:45. This verse isn't just about avoiding sin, it's describing a transformation that happens inside prayer. The Arabic word salah doesn't just mean prayer, its root means connection, specifically the connection between the earthly and the divine. When Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was asked about the purpose of prayer, he described it as miraj, an ascension, the same word used for his night journey to the heavens. This is where mainstream understanding stops. But the classical Islamic scholars, those who studied the Quran deeply and preserved the teachings of the Prophet, they went further. Al-Ghazali, one of Islam's greatest theologians, made a striking observation. He wrote in his masterwork Ihya Ulum ad-Din, how many people pray, yet their prayer does not rise beyond their shoulders? What did he mean? That most people pray with their bodies, but not with their hearts. They go through the form without inhabiting the meaning. That's what we're exploring today. Not the outer shell of Salah, the transformation hidden inside it, the physical dimension. When you stand in prayer, every position corresponds to a specific internal state. Standing upright, total submission and attention. Bowing, the mind surrenders to the will of God. Prostration, absolute humility. Your forehead touches the ground, your ego dissolves. Now, here's what's interesting. Modern research on posture and consciousness has shown something that Islamic scholars understood centuries ago. A study from Ohio State University found that adopting an upright posture increases alertness. A bowed or lowered posture naturally shifts consciousness toward reflection and surrender. This isn't because the posture itself is magical. It's because body and mind are connected. When you place your body in a position of humility, your consciousness naturally follows. The Sufi scholars called this tajdeed, renewal, but it's more grounded than mysticism. It's neurological. It's how the body and mind work together. The Prophet Muhammad taught this through action. He said, the closest a servant comes to his Lord is when he is prostrating. Sahih Muslim. Why is prostration the closest moment? Because in that posture, there's nowhere left for your ego to hide. But the physical dimension is just the entry point. There's a second layer that most believers never consciously explore. The linguistic dimension. The words of Salah, Fatiha, Tashahhud, the recitations, carry layers of meaning embedded in their structure. Take Bismillah, in the name of God. In Arabic, this phrase carries a specific weight. You're not just saying words, you're saying, I begin this action by invoking divine presence within my being. The classical Islamic scholar Al-Ghazali wrote extensively about this. He argued that the meaning of words must reach the heart, not just the mouth. The Quran itself emphasizes this. So have those who believed. The Arabic word here suggests not just intellectual belief, but internalized understanding. When you recite Ar-Rahman, the merciful, you're engaging with a divine attribute. Islamic scholarship suggests that when you consciously invoke this name, you're drawing mercy into your own consciousness. This is why the Prophet instructed followers to recite with Khushu, heartfelt presence and understanding. Listen to what Al-Ghazali said. Whoever prays without understanding the meaning of what he recites is like one who sends a gift to a king while turning his back. The gift arrives, but the relationship doesn't deepen. This is why Islamic scholars emphasize that understanding the translation is just as vital as pronouncing the Arabic. The meaning must reach the heart, not just the mouth. But there's a third dimension that explains why this connection goes so deep, the temporal dimension. Prayer doesn't exist only in the present moment. According to Islamic understanding, each time you pray, you're participating in something that spans centuries. Think about this. When you recite Fatiha, you're reciting the exact words spoken by Prophet Muhammad, the same words spoken by his companions, the same words spoken by Muslim scholars for nearly 1,400 years, the same words being spoken by over 1 billion Muslims right now. You're not praying alone. The classical scholar Al-Qushairi, writing in the 11th century, described this as the unity of time. The idea that prayer creates a vertical connection across centuries. You're joining a chain of spiritual practice that stretches from the time of the Prophet to today. This is why the Prophet emphasized communal prayer. The mosque is not just a gathering place. It's a concentration point for collective spiritual intention. Now, all three of these dimensions, physical, linguistic, temporal, serve a fourth purpose that most believers never consciously recognize: the transformation dimension. Think about the last Salah you prayed. Do you remember what verses you recited? What thoughts crossed your mind? Were you speaking to Allah, or simply completing a routine? This question haunted the greatest Islamic scholars for centuries. Here's what they discovered. Prayer isn't primarily about asking God for things. That's a beginning stage. Prayer is about transformation. It's about rewriting your consciousness. The classical scholar Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah spent decades analyzing the Quranic verses about prayer. He concluded that prayer is a systematic technology for aligning your inner state with divine reality. Look at the structure of Salah itself. You begin by stepping away from worldly concerns. You face a single direction, Mecca, which represents the unified center of Islamic spirituality. Psychologically, you're reorienting your entire being towards something greater than yourself. Then you speak, Allahu Akbar, God is greater. You're not just making a statement, you're recalibrating your consciousness. You're saying, God is greater than my ego, my fears, my ambitions, my suffering. This phrase, repeated throughout prayer, is a recalibration statement. In the recitation of Fatiha, you move through distinct psychological and spiritual stages. Stage 1. Praise. You acknowledge that all goodness comes from God. Your ego shrinks. Stage 2. Mercy. You recognize your own need for divine compassion. Humility deepens. Stage 3. Submission. You accept that your will aligns with divine will. Stage 4. Request. You ask for guidance, but not for selfish gain. You're asking to become someone better. Stage 5. The straight path. You're seeking the path of those who've transcended ego. Stage 6. Rejection of falsehood. You're turning away from delusion, from spiritual blindness. Stage 7. Integration. You exit this internal journey transformed, even if subtly. This entire psychological architecture unfolds in 2 minutes. Here's where something remarkable happens neurologically. Some psychologists describe a state of deep immersion and focus as flow, when self-consciousness dissolves and you're fully present. In that state, the brain's attention networks activate while self-referential thinking quiets down. Prayer naturally induces this state, but Islamic spirituality aims at something much deeper than psychological flow. In sincere prostration, many believers report experiencing a heightened awareness of Allah and a deep sense of spiritual closeness. It's not just emptiness of self, it's filling with divine presence. The Prophet Muhammad said something remarkable. Prayer is the mirage of the believer. He meant that prayer, like his night journey to the heavens, is an ascension. A journey from the earthly to the divine. A transformation that happens in every sincere prayer. Now, all of this raises a question that haunted Islamic scholars for centuries. If prayer has this potential for transformation, why do so many Muslims go through their entire lives without experiencing it? The answer lies in understanding the barriers. In the 13th century, the classical scholar Al-Nawawi documented something troubling. He observed that Muslims were performing prayer correctly in form, but not in essence. They were present in body, absent in mind. Islamic theology calls this ghafla, heedlessness, and it's the greatest obstacle to experiencing the depths of Salah. Al-Ghazali identified the specific barriers that block this transformation. The first barrier, distraction. Your mind wanders to work, to family problems, to what you're cooking for dinner. Research on attention shows that the human mind naturally drifts. During prayer, when you're focusing on abstract spiritual meaning rather than concrete tasks, this drift is especially common. Islamic scholars have a specific remedy, muraqabah, conscious awareness. Not meditation in the Eastern sense, but deliberate, moment-by-moment attention to what you're saying and doing. The Prophet taught this through example. He prayed with such presence that his companions said his posture would change during prayer, not from physical discomfort, but from the intensity of his awareness. The second barrier, arrogance. This one's subtle. You finish your prayer and feel self-satisfied. I prayed today. I did my duty. This very satisfaction blocks the spiritual opening that prayer creates. The Prophet warned explicitly, the worst prayer is one where the worshipper is aware of themselves performing the worship. Ego becomes the barrier. The third barrier, mechanical repetition. You've prayed thousands of times. After that many repetitions, it's easy to let your body go through the motions while your mind checks out. Al-Tabari, a classical Quranic scholar, wrote about something called Tajdeed at-Tawheed, renewing your understanding with each prayer. Even though the words are identical, each recitation should feel fresh, as if you're speaking to God for the first time. The fourth barrier, disconnection from meaning. Many Muslims pray in Arabic without understanding what they're reciting. The words pass through the mouth but never reach the heart. This is why Islamic scholars across all schools of thought emphasize that understanding the meaning of your prayer is essential. Whether through translation, explanation, or reflection, the meaning must be conscious. But everything we've discussed so far is only the outer layer. What comes next is what the classical scholars considered the difference between a living prayer and a lifeless one. The problem of mechanical, spiritless prayer didn't start recently. It's been the central crisis of Islamic spirituality for over 1,000 years. Al-Ghazali complained about it in the 11th century. Al-Nawawi documented it in the 13th century. The problem has persisted because spiritual depth requires constant renewal and deliberate cultural transmission. What changed over time was how Islamic institutions responded. As institutional Islam became more formalized, the emphasis gradually shifted from cultivating inner understanding to perfecting outer correctness. Instead of training students in Khushu, heartfelt presence, and the deep meaning of prayer, emphasis moved to memorization and legal precision. Prayer became about performing the ritual correctly, rather than experiencing its transformative potential. This wasn't malicious, it was practical. Institutions require standardization, but something vital was lost. The cost has been significant. Today, many Muslims report going through their prayers without feeling connected spiritually. They fulfill the obligation, but the depths remain unexplored. Now here's the good news. This knowledge hasn't disappeared. It's been preserved in the Quran. It's in the Hadith. It's in the writings of classical Islamic scholars like Al-Ghazali, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, al-Nawawi, and Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. Modern Islamic scholars are beginning to resurrect this understanding. Sheikh Abdullah bin Baya, one of the most influential contemporary Islamic thinkers, has written extensively about recovering the spiritual dimensions of Salah. His work emphasizes that prayer is not an obligation to be fulfilled, but a gift to be received. So here's the question. How do you actually access this? 3 practical steps. Step 1. Understand the meaning. Before your next Salah, read the translation of Fatiha and the surahs you'll be reciting. Let the meaning settle in your mind. When you pray, your consciousness will naturally be more engaged. Step 2. Consciously release distractions. Before you begin, pause for a moment. Think about one thing you're about to release, a worry, a thought, a distraction. Then consciously let it go as you say, Allahu Akbar. Step 3. Personalize your dua. In the quiet moments during Salah or after, speak to Allah in your own words, in your own language. Don't just recite, communicate, ask, reflect. Let the prayer become a conversation, not a recitation. The hidden layers of Salah aren't hidden in the sense of being concealed. They're hidden in plain sight, embedded in structures that billions of people interact with every day without grasping their depth. This is the understanding that animated Islamic spirituality from the beginning, and it remains accessible today. The next time you stand for Salah, try this. Before you begin, pause for one moment. Ask yourself, what in my life feels bigger than Allah right now? That single reflection can change the quality of your entire prayer. Because the answer, consciously acknowledged, is nothing. And that realization, truly internalized, transforms everything. If this exploration shifted how you think about Islamic prayer, about what prayer actually is, there's more to discover. I've created a companion video that walks through specific practices, moment by moment, that unlock what we've discussed here. It's designed for people who want to move from intellectual understanding to lived experience. That video lives in the description. But here's the broader invitation. These insights aren't unique to Islam. Every authentic spiritual tradition, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, encodes transformation into their core practices. The human nervous system is wired for spiritual experience through ritualized, conscious attention. If you're interested in exploring how different traditions understand prayer and spiritual practice, consider subscribing. We explore these deeper dimensions every week. The secrets were never really hidden. They were just waiting for someone to pay attention.